What the fuck? Hey, so, I guess I have a following now? I can't for the life of me figure out why anyone would click on my videos. I mean, if you're really that bored, then I guess I can be background noise for you guys. I mean, this part's not even scripted. But I might figure I might as well keep the train going and see how far we can get. So, thank you guys for the 100 subs. And thank you guys for the views on the last video. I hope that this video will get any type of feedback. It's gonna be a completely different type of video from the other one because we cover all types of content here, music, anime, movies, video games. This is just if anyone likes to talk and wants to hear someone else talk about obscure things. Like I said, it's too broad for me to feel like I have any type of decent following at this point. But, you know, 3K views on the last video, I feel like I have to do something to thank you guys. So, once again, thank you for the 100 subs. Hopefully we can get to 200, maybe 5, maybe 1,000. If you guys like, please share the video, like, comment, and subscribe. I'm still taking it all in. I literally just figured out the stuff, and I had to make it quick for you guys. So yeah, I guess get to the video now. I don't know how to do these things, so Dr. Stone is a manga that was published in Weekly Shonen Jump from March 6, 2017 to March 7, 2022. It's by Riichiro Inagaki, the same author of the popular Shonen Jump manga Eyeshield 21, which is also another one of my favorites, and is by far one of the greatest mangas I've had the pleasure of reading. As you can tell by the title, thumbnail, and introduction that this is going to be heavily biased. I even wrote a script for it so I could properly articulate my thoughts, which I never do for a video, by the way, so this really is a special occasion. Before we begin, I just reached 100 subs on YouTube, and while that's not a lot in comparison to other discussion channels, it means the world to me. I would deeply appreciate it if you would all make sure you like, comment, and hit the bell notification and set it to all so that you may continue to hit that sweet algorithm for me. Anyway, let's begin the video. Without all that being said, when doing an analysis for the entire series, I feel it is best to make sure it is structured and not just rambling thoughts that I feel, which is why we're going to do this in segments. If it hasn't been obvious yet, there's going to be massive spoilers for the entirety of the manga, not just up to where the anime is. So if you are mildly interested in watching or reading, then I suggest you exit now and put this in your watch later, or, you know, subscribe so you don't forget about me. Anyways, off to the video. To start off, if I were to say what the appeal of the story was in one sentence, I'd say Dr. Stone lets the reader feel what it's like to start from absolutely nothing, and then let us actually feel what it's like to slowly but surely grow and evolve humanity throughout the technological ages. From using stone tools and fire all the way up to building rocket ships. As stated before, I'm not even going to try to sugarcoat it. I love this manga. I began reading it when its third chapter came out, and I continued to read it all the way till its last chapter with absolute joy. Even though I said there'd be spoilers, I'm still going to be breaking down parts of the story, that way there's context as to why I'm talking about the things I love, just in case any new people aren't completely sold on it yet. I'm not doing a full recap of everything that happened from start to finish, just a brief run through of major moments of the story, so a lot of characters and events will be skimmed. Don't get me wrong, all of these characters and moments are good in their own way, but they aren't necessarily integral to what I'm trying to get across in this video. But trust me, each character and important theme that I feel like is relevant will be discussed. So with all that said, let's start from the beginning. What is Dr. Stone? The story of Dr. Stone is a story about our planet Earth in the late 2010s, about the same time it began published in real time, suddenly seeing every single human being on Earth being turned to stone. The two characters we see the story through are Taiju, who is your typical shonen dumb but kind-hearted protagonist who wears his heart on his sleeve, and Senku, a genius teen scientist who is very trial and error and believes in the method of hard work will triumph everything. As all of humanity is petrified, we then cut to Taiju waking up, and he eventually finds out that Senku has also woken up a bit before him. It turns out that both Taiju and Senku were conscious the entire time they were petrified. Senku then reveals to Taiju and us to the readers that they have been petrified for 3,700 years. That's 3,700 years. With that, Senku has a single goal to revive all of humanity, and Taiju is going to do everything he can to help him. Before going any further, I should say that almost all the characters in Dr. Stone have some sort of special attribute about them that's just dialed up to 11. In Senku's case, it's his genius. So he isn't just smart, he's the smartest being on the planet, bar none. And Taiju is an endurance beast. He quite literally never gets tired, and he has infinite stamina to lift things that are way beyond normal humans in our world. Together with brains and brawn, they use their talents to figure out how to revive everyone on Earth to restore humanity back to what it was. The premise of the show alone is one of those special ones that have you locked into the story almost immediately, like Attack on Titan or Death Note. But the appeal of the show to me isn't the premise, but the way the author uses it to breed creativity and innovation. We literally see them work together to build things like shelter and clothing and to keep them warm in the cold, which, takes a bit of time. It doesn't just happen right away. A big thing of Dr. Stone is the amount of trial and error it takes to get things right. Almost nothing in this show happens with ease. Once they're relatively secure, Senku then begins to work on a revival fluid, which after working meticulously on, thanks to the help of Taiju, he eventually figures out how to make the revival fluid. The author truly shows his care for the process of invention in the early stages of the story. The way he's able to strip the characters naked and give them nothing to work with but their brains and physical skills makes you question, what would you do if you were suddenly sent back into time in an era like this where there was nothing but stone to work with? How would you survive the weather, the landscape, and dangerous animals? Speaking of which, Senku and Taiju are then attacked by dangerous animals, which then force them to release somebody nearby, the strongest human, Shishio Tsukasa. After saving Senku and Taiju, Tsukasa at first joins them and vows to protect them, but after learning Senku's plan to revive humanity to exactly what it was before, Tsukasa turns on them. His philosophy is the opposite of Senku's. Humanity before its petrification was corrupt, and the humans of the past only cared about greed. The way Tsukasa sees it, the world has been reset, and they have the chance to purify it from corruption by destroying all the older people set in their ways and have already led lives of sin, and instead letting the children be brought into the new world and teaching them values of purity and not to abstain from greed, right? So this is where the big moral question of the story of who is right comes into question, and should humanity be restored back to the way it was? Do these three people even have the right to decide the fate of all humanity? Shenanigans happen and Senku escapes from Tsukasa, who believe he had killed Senku. Senku then eventually finds a tribe of village people who somehow aren't petrified or even aware that there was a civilization before theirs. Taiju acts as a double agent and joins Tsukasa's side, and thus begins the Stone Wars. Whoever wins this gets the right to decide humanity's fate. Senku then has to gain the trust of the villagers, and the best way to do so is by giving them things that cause them to see him in high regard. The purpose of the villagers in the story is to allow us as the reader to see what it would be like for humans of the past to be exposed to things of the modern age. I mean, imagine meeting a caveman who's only eaten unseasoned meat and sandy apples all his life, and then giving him a burger and fries with a large Coke. It's a simple meal to us, but to him it would be like biting into actual heaven. Needless to say, Senku manages to win them over with unique modern inventions that will appeal to them, and here's where things really get to shine and we get to see what makes Dr. Stone special. I don't know about you guys, but my knowledge of starting a civilization by going from basic necessities to luxuries is essentially zero. Some people back when the manga was running even casually made jokes that if they were in Senku's position and could only bring one thing from the modern world with them, they would bring the entirety of Dr. Stone's manga collection with them, seeing as how it almost feels like a survival guide of what to do if you have no access to modern technology and need to survive. The manga is actually packed with that much detail and teaches us not only that the characters, but how to use it as well. I found it a way to make learning fun. I could go into detail about the inventions that Senku comes up with to both aid in the advancement of society, like making a phone, as well as one of the basic survival things like making soap from seashells or even making Coca-Cola for someone. But for the sake of making sure this video isn't an hour long, I think it's best for us to use the roadmaps as an example. The roadmaps are literal maps that Senku creates throughout the story to reach a scientific goal. The majority of roadmaps consist of a long series of tasks and usually tie into the main plot of the story. A good way you could think of them is essentially that they are main story quests, which they all have a list of criteria that must be met in order to complete. But the interesting thing about these roadmaps is that they aren't simply gathering the materials and craft types of situations. Some roadmaps require roadmaps just to start working on the original roadmap. Like I said, it's simpler if you just think of them as story quests and side quests. For example, on the roadmap to making medicine for one of the villagers who is sick, the Kingdom of Science needs sulfuric acid. Gathering it is much easier said than done, seeing as inhaling it a little bit is enough to kill you faster than you could tie your shoe. This means the gang needs to first make gas mask strong enough to survive something as strong as sulfuric acid. The unfortunate part is that because of this, they don't have any samples outside of the actual pool which they're trying to get from the original. It means that they have no way to test it until they're already using it. This means we have to go and watch Senku go through a series of arduous tasks, and we feel that. We feel what they feel because the tension and the stakes are there, and if one mistake, there's no getting back what they lost. Needless to say, they accomplished their goals, but as with all great stories, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Yeah, it's cool seeing cars and cell phones being used in a primitive setting, forcing the cast to be creative, but the real treasure is seeing them take on the bare essentials and working together in a collaborative effort to achieve their goals. We get to follow this journey with them and actually learn these new exciting things along the way, which is why it's fitting that the main character's catchphrase is "Get excited." One of the things I love in any story is its characters. Some people can be drawn into worlds and the themes and aesthetics of a story alone. For example, if a story has a big plot twist or capable of invoking some sort of vibe, that may be enough to stick in someone's mind. But for me, seeing characters grow and evolve and their relationship dynamics change is what really sticks with me. Needless to say, Dr. Stone has a lot of characters, which sometimes the stories can drag the plots down or leave the viewers wanting more because their favorite characters usually sometimes in these situations don't get enough screen time. I've only seen a handful of stories manage to handle such large cast and still make sure the majority of characters get a decent enough screen time. Obviously, One Piece is what I'm referring to here, which if anyone knows me, they know that I'm a super fan and I will shamelessly plug it at any point that I want because it is peak fiction. If I get a chance to talk about One Piece, I will talk about One Piece. That being said, Dr. Stone has a huge cast, and I will not be talking about your favorite character unless they also happen to be mine. I could be here for almost an hour talking about every character, from Kaseki the craftsman, whose joy for sculpting new things is infectious and makes you want to explode out of your clothes with him, or Sai, who's shy and introverted in nature but love for math and coding is so wholesome that you can't help but, appreciate him for who he is, right? Kohaku is also a great character. Her badass gorilla style that doesn't get bogged down by "I'm secretly in love with MC Kun" is a rare example of a woman in shonen that can be strong and not only use her strength but not fight for love as the source of her strength. That kind of stuff gets really annoying, especially in shonen, right? There's also Gen the Mentalist. I would argue that Gen is honestly the backbone of the entire story in both real life and for the cast of characters. He kind of is the glue that holds everything together. No one can quite move the story along and get characters where they need to be like him, honestly. Those are just a few honorable mentions, but like I said, there are so many characters in this story that people can resonate with, and I simply can't talk about them all. Certain characters have important roles and things simply couldn't happen without them, but I feel as those aren't integral to have their own specific sections. The ones I do want to talk about are the ones that I personally feel the story revolved itself around. The very characters are what the story is trying to convey about the nature of humanity. The first choice to talk about is obviously Senku. After all, if the main character of your story isn't worth having his own discussion section, then there's no character that is, to be honest. Senku for me acts as a sort of moral compass for everyone in the entire story. That's not to say that everything he does is necessarily lawful good. For example, there was a time Senku uncovered an audio file by his father that he left behind, and he was going to use that audio file to trick Tsukasa's forces into believing that the world outside of Japan actually wasn't petrified and that Tsukasa was lying. It's a bit of a dirty trick, but it just goes to show that Senku isn't always going to do the most lawful good type of action, even if it's something like lying just to get the enemy to turn on who they thought was their leader. But outside of that, Senku's never done anything really overly edgy or heinous to the point where we're questioning his morals. For the most part, he really is a guiding star for the other characters to look upon, to see just that science can be used for bad, yeah, but that doesn't mean it has to be that way. He uses it for good. He shows people how to do that. I think his character has some flaws by design, but I think the good things about Senku outweigh the bad by a large margin. One of the best things about his character is that he's really just a chill guy who loves science, man, you know? He's well aware of his capabilities, but he isn't walking around with some big ego, and he's more than willing to let others give their input and contribute, as long as it doesn't put others in danger. If anything, Senku constantly puts himself at risk because he doesn't feel like he's irreplaceable, because in his mind, science always finds a way. This doesn't have much to do with him as a character, but it's interesting that for the first 3 chapters of the story, it didn't really start from Senku's perspective, which is very rare in a story, almost unheard of, to be honest. A lot of shows have characters who steal the show early on, but I think because of Senku's nature, he's unlike most MCs. Despite his skills and abilities to get others to follow him, he's not edgy or cocky, but he's not chivalrous and straight-laced either. He's just an overall good guy. I think when being compared to the original MC Taiju, he has a lot going on for him more than Taiju. Taiju's sole motivation for staying awake was to confess it to his crush, but outside of that, there wasn't much more to his character. The fact that we had to see Senku through a simpler lens before stepping into him goes to show the complexity of his character. Very rarely do we see an entire show revolve around the lower ability of other characters, in this case their terms of intelligence. That way it can enhance the wow factor of the MC's accomplishments. We feel that Senku is impressive as a reader because almost everyone around him is always impressed. If the show was centered around nothing but geniuses flexing their technological advancements, it would just be another battle shonen with mathematical equations as their power system. Senku isn't supposed to be a character I identify with, but someone you can admire and hope to be like one day, although he'd probably tell you otherwise. Someone that would agree with you on that statement though is Chrome. Anyone who is a fan of the series would instantly recognize why he deserves to get his own section. If Senku is the brain of the series, Chrome is the heart. In the simplest way I can describe Chrome is that he is the embodiment of the one question that has moved the entire human race forward: why? Chrome's need for understanding is something that is in every human, and it's the reason why Senku knows that no matter what happens, as long as humans are allowed to live, no matter how long it takes, they'll always continue to discover new things. Chrome essentially started off as absolutely nobody. He had no idea about anything around him, but through countless hours of trial and error, he managed to get a fundamental understanding of the basic sciences. And in a hypothetical scenario, if Senku were to never get revived, science wouldn't die with him. It would always find a way to come back. Sure, it would take just as long as it took our civilization to reach the modern era, and there would definitely be some struggles along the way, but thanks to people like Chrome, humanity will always rise to accomplish great things, and I think that's an amazing way to show this ideology through this character. The last person I'm going to be talking about is going to be a bit of a wild card, but honestly shouldn't be unexpected. Ryusui is quite literally the best character in all of Dr. Stone. Every panel he's in is absolutely peak entertainment, and he's one of those electrifying characters who steal the show. If Senku is the brain and Chrome is the heart, then Ryusui is without a doubt the soul. On the surface, it's easy to write him off as a one-note character or even disagree with his philosophy of life. After all, greed is one of the biggest causes for destruction in all of human history. So a man whose sole purpose is driven by the desire to have everything in the world would also be the embodiment of what's wrong with the world. It's also the reason why people like Tsukasa actively tried to stop the revival of humanity, because he believed that greed would corrupt the world again. With this in mind, it's safe to say that because of greed, humanity has done some terrible things. However, greed is also a part of our human nature. I realize this is the part where I start to lose people. However, I'd like to make a brief argument that the concept of greed itself isn't inherently evil. If we're basing it on the idea of the 7 deadly sins, the idea of greed may come off as evil, but it's something that every human has, and then maybe it's not something that we should be repressing and locking away in the shadows, but rather something that we acknowledge. I think what Ryusui's character is meant to represent in this world of super geniuses bent on saving the planet and evil bad guys who like to trick young women into sleeping with them, Ryusui shows us that there's a right way to desire. I mean, look at other examples of the 7 deadly sins in the same way. Is it wrong to lust after your spouse? Is it wrong to crave a giant meal after a hard day's work? Is it bad to want to sit in the house and do nothing all day on occasion? Wrath is always bad though, because you have no enemies, but that's a different discussion for another video. The point I'm trying to get across here is that Ryusui is an honest character. Any one of those examples can be easily taken to the extreme and you'll end up with some horrible things. I think if we were more honest about our wants and desires, it would lead to less deception, because wanting something doesn't mean you want it all to yourself. Ryusui is more than happy to share his fortune with those around him, because what's the point of having a massive wealth if there's no one to share it with? I think flawed characters are the best ones, because it takes a lot to write a character who isn't meant to be looked at as correct, but still manages to be likable in some capacity. I think their flaws allow us to gravitate towards them and let our guard down. Sort of like when the smartest kid in the class gets a 70 on a test and it makes you feel less bad about your 65, because even the best person struggled alongside you. If everyone was as straight-laced as Senku and Taiju, it would almost make it feel wrong to want things. Throughout the story, we see that everybody is driven by some sort of desire. Senku wants to go to space. Taiju wants to confess his love to Yuzuriha. Gen wants cola. The list goes on. But Ryusui shows us that it's okay to want a fast car and a big house, as long as you manage those things without taking from others and making sure you give back along the way. I think one of the biggest issues we have as humans is that we take without regard for others, and it's only something you can really understand if you put those desires on the forefront so you're aware of the cost. Like a wise man once said, we know the price of everything but the value of nothing. Ryusui understands the value of everything regardless of the price, which is exactly why he wants those things. He sees everything as precious and valuable, even people. I've done a lot of praise towards the series and its characters, as well as the themes they embody, but I've made an effort to rarely mention anything negative about the series. Obviously, I have very little to say negatively though, because I titled it as being almost perfect, and I just spent 90% of this video yapping about random concepts that I barely understand myself. That being said, I do think Dr. Stone has some pretty major flaws that stop it from being the greatest manga ever written, specifically with how the story is framed. Dr. Stone ran almost exactly 5 years minus 1 day, and has 232 chapters excluding any side chapters from Byakuya's storyline or any other extras, and in my opinion this is way too short. I realize that's not a negative, especially because I'm not arguing that it was rushed. And once again, I literally spent an incredibly long time gushing over the entire story and its characters. Obviously, what I mean from the story is that we simply did not get enough of it for me to consider it perfect. The world as we know it is filled with different religions, cultures, philosophies, ideologies, and political beliefs. And these different mindsets usually tend to be the reason we have conflict in the world. I find it hard to believe that a story about the entire world getting frozen for 3,700 years goes so little into any of these aspects. Yes, sure, there are bad people and bad mindsets that the protagonists come across, but we don't ever see the ramifications that something like this has on the people of the world as they start to get revived. In our world, you would see cults forming and other factions being formed where they would either worship the petrification, saying something like, oh, it was God himself who chose to petrify us, and it's against the Bible to do so, to undo it, because without it, all we do is sin, so clearly God wanted us to stop sinning by petrifying us. Something like that someone would come up with or whatever, you know. Or you would have people who would fear it and could potentially cause mass hysteria and potential riots due to the government conspiracy theories. I mean, if you really think about it, imagine being randomly frozen on a Tuesday afternoon and unconscious for 1,000 years, only to wake up to an entirely new planet, and the only explanation is, oh yeah, it was aliens, they left. They won't do it again though, I'm sure. Imagine just sitting there, going through your day, working minimum wage, getting yelled at your boss, killing yourself in work and school, just for you to be in your back of your mind, like, what is the whole point of this? What, is humanity gonna get frozen again one day? Not only would people question what's the point of working, but they would actively rebel against the concept where there's no guarantee an apocalypse couldn't randomly happen again. This is not to say that I think these are inherent plot holes, and that because Dr. Stone didn't address these specific ideologies that I view that story as less than. I'm simply saying that in a story about an event that affects the world, the story misses a huge opportunity to cover these themes about the actual world. Not seeing how this affects the revived people's mindsets as far as politics and religion goes doesn't mean I don't think it's good. It just means it's not as great of a story as it could be. Once again, this is a shameless plug here, I don't care. But a story like One Piece has such a vast amount of politics and religious beliefs between its characters and its geographical locations. It almost blows me away that other stories don't jump at the chance to create their own world like this. But then again, that's why he's called Goda for a reason. If you still think this is a weird topic point to talk about, I get it. I'm basically saying I'm deducting points on the story because the writer didn't cater to my specific interest in storytelling, which can come off to others as me believing that I think I can write a better story than the already 2-time published in the most popular and competitive comic franchise in all of Japan. Go read I Shield 21, by the way. It's one of my favorites, right behind Dr. Stone. I hope this doesn't come off as that way because it's not my intention. My intention is to point out an oversight on how the narrative of Dr. Stone leans too much into the aspects of what make it work, which gives it a good story. But we're not talking about good. We're talking about an experience. We're talking about something that could have been considered one of the greatest pieces of fiction in all of history, which I know it could have been if it managed to do all the things that stories that are considered peak fiction, such as One Piece, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, etc., fit whatever nerd stuff you want to put into those spots. I just listed off random names to show that even though I feel personally that Dr. Stone is one of the most fun manga series I've ever had the pleasure of reading, I wouldn't dare put it next to giants like that with only 232 chapters because it simply can't compete. I think if Dr. Stone leaned into the psychology of its characters as well as the philosophy of morality of their choices that the characters make, it would have been the perfect story. The fact that when Senku and Tsukasa first clashed ideals in the first few arcs, it was never even discussed once if Senku's way of thinking was correct. He was never challenged on it from a philosophical standpoint, which just to me shows a lack of cerebral thinking that the story has. This is not to start an argument on who was right between the two. The fact that the story frames it in a way that Senku is 10 billion% right, no questions asked, is incredibly frustrating because no one in human history has had the right answer straight away, which is the whole point of trial and error in science. The world of Dr. Stone is supposed to be an almost one-to-one of our world up until the global petrification, which means there are dictators and corrupt politicians at this current point in time. If they didn't exist, Tsukasa wouldn't have been a tyrant from the beginning. It's the whole basis of his argument. I realized throughout the story that they mentioned things like Dunbar's number, which Google it, and they also mentioned the fact that they don't plan on reviving every character at once because it would create a panic. But I gotta ask something. At what point in time would it be a good idea to reawaken someone like Kim Jong-un? Okay, let's say they abolish his dictatorship. What then? What about his loyal generals who lived comfortably under him? How are you going to rehabilitate an entire nation of people who believe their leader is a god and believe defying him is punishable by death? Are you going to simply choose to not revive the super bad people, even though that was established to be wrong in the first few chapters? What about the people who were in prison at the time? Senku is a liar and Taiju especially isn't. When the world wants to know how these children saved all of humanity, they're going to recount the fact that both of them managed to stay conscious, and one of them was even able to count the seconds that passed for thousands of years. Who's to say the criminals won't claim they did the same? There's no way to prove that they didn't. And yes, some will show signs of mental derangement and inability to integrate back into society, but compared to everyone currently locked up on Earth, that's like 20, maybe 30% of the prison population. So with no way to prove the criminals were or were not conscious and served more than enough of their time, then they'd have to make a choice of either ignoring them and saying fuck you guys, and the apocalypse doesn't change the fact that you hadn't ate the weed back in 2005 in Texas, or to avoid non-stop prison riots and civil unrest from their families, they have to release 70 to 80% of the criminals that aren't crazy or were on death row into the entire world, regardless if they got something like 100 life sentences, which is only 2,500 years. It's crazy. It's absolute. Okay. Sorry. I realized while typing this that I went on a bit of a manic spree there at the end. I think it just goes to show how much I care about the series and see it for more than what it was, but what it could have been. I doubt anyone has made it this far, but if you did, I can't thank you enough. My channel is still incredibly tiny, but 100 subs means the world to me. And more importantly, it means that I don't have the excuse anymore that no one's watching, and therefore I don't have to put my all into any video I do from now on. Because if even one of you are a returning viewer, I hope that you can feel the passion I have for the story, and I feel like this was important enough to share with you guys my passion. Thank you for watching. Now let's aim for 1,000 subs. Oh boy, does that guy like to talk a lot, huh? Which, hopefully you guys like hearing that. Like I said, I don't expect these videos to be like anything special. I kind of just started this off of a whim. So yeah, I thank you. I can't thank you guys enough. I'm literally recording this outro right after I did the intro. So I'm still in complete shell shock of this. If the video comes out when I want it to, I project that it had reached 100 subs. Which is kind of, presumptuous of me, but 93 at the time of recording, and their first video only went up from there. This video, hopefully there is an audience for it. Dr. Stone is one of my favorite mangas to have ever read. I think that Ingaki Riichiro, if I'm saying that right, once again, I'm recording this right after the intro, so the information in the main video will be more correct than anything said here. Yeah, he's one of my favorite writers of all time. If you haven't seen I Shield 21 either, as well as Dr. Stone, both are really good. Once again, thank you guys for watching. I can't thank you guys enough for supporting me. Even if this video doesn't get any views, if it's one person who's either new to the channel or wants to see if I'm not just a one-hit wonder, I thank you. Any viewership is enough. I hope one day I can make a career out of this stuff. It's been a long time. I'm sure you can hear like the race cars going off in the background. I'm not anywhere special. I just live in the Bronx. So yeah, there's gonna be traffic noises in all of my videos. I don't even know if I'm looking at the camera properly. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time with another video. Yeah, we'll talk more about that later. So I guess I should just